On the morning of May 19, 1536, the Tower of London held its breath. A queen was about to die. Anne Boleyn, the woman who had changed the course of English history, faced her final hours. Charged with treason, adultery, and even incest, her fate was sealed. Yet, witnesses described her as strangely calm, almost cheerful, a stark contrast to the despair that had gripped her just days before. How could a woman on the brink of execution display such composure? To understand Anne's final moments, we have to look at the man who orchestrated her downfall, Thomas Cromwell. As King Henry VIII's chief minister, Cromwell saw Anne as an obstacle. The king was desperate for a male heir, and his passion for Anne had cooled. His eyes had turned to the quiet, gentle Jane Seymour. Cromwell knew that to make way for Jane, Anne had to be removed, permanently. The solution was a show trial built on a mountain of lies. The charges were sensational and designed to shock the public and justify the king's actions. Just 2 days before her execution, her marriage to Henry was annulled, and their daughter, Elizabeth, was declared illegitimate. In the eyes of the law, Anne was no longer a queen, and her child was no longer a princess. But not everyone was convinced of her guilt. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury and a close friend of Anne's, heard her final confession. He was so moved that he reportedly wept, later writing that he believed she was innocent. Yet, even Cranmer was powerless. He had to agree to the annulment, a move that sealed Anne's fate but was perhaps a desperate attempt to appease the king and protect the future of the English Reformation he and Anne had championed. Henry VIII, in a supposed act of mercy, decided Anne would not be burned at the stake or suffer the clumsy, brutal strike of an English executioner's axe. Instead, he ordered a specialist swordsman from Calais, France, renowned for his skill in delivering a clean, swift death. This was presented as a final kindness from a king to his once beloved wife. However, the timeline tells a more sinister story. Records show the French swordsman was summoned and paid before the verdict of Anne's trial was even delivered. Her execution wasn't just a possibility, it was a foregone conclusion. Henry wasn't just planning for a conviction, he was meticulously planning the event itself. The trial was pure theatre, a public performance to legitimize a murder. As Anne climbed the scaffold, a hush fell over the crowd. This was the moment that would be etched into history. Instead of a fiery condemnation of the king who had condemned her, she delivered a speech of remarkable humility and grace. She didn't confess to the crimes she was accused of, but she also didn't challenge the king's authority. She asked the people to pray for him, calling him a gentle and sovereign lord. Why would she do this? Most historians believe it was her final, brilliant move to protect her daughter. By showing submission and loyalty, she hoped to spare Elizabeth from the king's wrath. It was a mother's ultimate sacrifice, using her last breaths to safeguard her child's future. She then knelt, her ladies-in-waiting removing her ermine mantle and headdress. She calmly said the words, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul." The swordsman, in a final act of trickery to ensure she wouldn't flinch, reportedly called out, "Where is my sword?" And as Anne turned her head to look, he struck. It was over in an instant. The aftermath was just as chilling. As the cannon fired from the tower to signal Anne's death, King Henry VIII, who had been waiting for the signal, immediately set off to meet Jane Seymour. There was no period of mourning, no respect for the woman who had been his wife and queen. The haste was indecent, a clear sign that Anne's death was merely a step in his plan to remarry and secure his dynasty. While the king celebrated, Anne's body was treated with shocking disrespect. She was denied a proper coffin. Her ladies wrapped her head and body in a white cloth and placed them inside an old arrow chest found in the Tower's armory. She was buried in an unmarked grave within the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, inside the tower walls. The king and his court tried to erase her from history. Portraits were destroyed, her emblems were removed from palaces, and her name was forbidden to be spoken. It was as if she had never existed. But history has a way of remembering what power tries to erase. The case against Anne Boleyn is now universally seen by historians as a sham, with no credible evidence to support the charges. She was a victim of political ambition and a king's ruthless obsession. But the ultimate irony, and Anne's greatest vindication, came through the very daughter she died to protect. Elizabeth, the child declared illegitimate, would ascend the throne as Queen Elizabeth I. She would rule for over 44 years, becoming one of the most successful and beloved monarchs in English history, ushering in a golden age. She never forgot her mother. Throughout her life, Elizabeth I treasured a special locket ring. On the outside was her initial E, made of diamonds, but when opened, it revealed two portraits. One was of herself, the other was of Anne Boleyn. Despite all attempts to erase her, Anne lived on, her legacy secured not by a son, but by the brilliant, powerful daughter she left behind. Anne Boleyn's story is not just one of tragedy, but of incredible bravery and a mother's undying love. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most compelling moments. See you next time.